Hello, hello, and good morning. Thank you for joining us for what would be considered the last or finale or season finale, excuse me, of our second binational trade webinar series. My name is Buna George. I serve as the executive director of the Greater Yuma Port Authority. And again, this binational webinar series is a collaborative effort between Greater Yuma Economic Development Corporation, OPRO de San Luis Rio Colorado, and Forefront ED. So to highlight and showcase the many available assets of our mega region. Please note that the presenter is more than happy to answer your questions. So please, if you have any, input them into the Q&A box and we'll have a Q&A session right after the presentation. And this week, I am privileged to say that we have Greg LaVann that joins us. So Greg LaVann is a senior vice president for the Greater Yuma Economic Development Corporation, and he has assisted companies in creating over 2,280 new jobs with 1.4 billion in capital investments in the past 9 years that he's been here in Yuma. Greg has also administered Foreign Trade Zone number 219 since 2009. So he's helped 11 companies become free trade zone users throughout the county for free trade zone number 219 that has over 100 million of goods moving through its zone on an annual basis. So with that, Greg, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to learn of the many benefits of the foreign trade zone and then what you've got to share about it. So thank you again for joining us, and the floor is all yours, sir.
Thank you, Buna. And just want to make sure we're sharing my screen here. Can everyone see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I've been asked by this esteemed panel to talk to you today about foreign trade zones and explain why they may be a great fit for you or your clients. But before I jump in, I want to just quickly talk about this first slide you're looking at. When our region, the Greater Yuma region, talks about our community, we're talking about 4 states, 2 nations, 1 region. And we sincerely mean that when we say that our communities share labor force, resources, and commerce. And foreign trade zones were made specifically for regions like ourselves. They make a lot of sense because goods are moving from international markets into our region. And with that, so many different things are being produced on both sides of the border. And so I think this program in particular is going to be very interesting to many of you on the call today, because this was made for us to not only increase our investment in our community, but also create new industries for us to attract to our greater area and our greater region of our community. So with that being said, I want to jump ahead. There is a lot of information out there about foreign trade zones, and it can be a bit overwhelming and very confusing at times. So I'm going to try to simplify the program for you and help you decide if it's worth incorporating into your facilities. So really just a quick snapshot about foreign trade zones and how they work. They were established in 1934 to essentially help US manufacturers and producers attract and compete with their foreign competitors. And with that, the ultimate goal was to create additional domestic activity and help create employment opportunities that would benefit the United States. Now, along with that, it was also meant to work very closely with our partners in Mexico, because the understanding was that a lot of goods were moving not only through the US ports of entry, but also through Mexican ports of entry. And so there was an opportunity to collaborate with this program and really create a new industry base for our entire areas. And so the essentials of the foreign trade zone really are that goods that enter into a foreign trade zone in the United States are treated as if they've never actually entered into the United States at all. When a good is basically brought across the seas from any foreign destination into the United States, into a foreign trade zone, it moves directly from the ports of entry into a foreign trade zone, at which time it can be warehoused, it can be stored for a certain point of time, it can be used into a different manufacturing production item, or it actually can just be held and then at some point in time released back into the United States or back across into foreign markets. So ultimately, there are a number of different ways that foreign trade zones work. They can benefit manufacturing, they can benefit warehousing, they can benefit assembly. And so really for you, you have to look at, does a foreign trade zone work for me and how does it work for me? But if you can figure out a way to make it work for you, it can be incredibly lucrative for your business. It can be incredibly beneficial to movement of your goods. it can be incredibly beneficial to your bottom line of cost savings as well. So what can be done in the foreign trade zone? Well, you can store goods, you can test them, you can sample, you can repair, salvage goods or destroy. Many foreign trade zone users particularly use it for warehousing. Some use it for manufacturing, and all of them use the foreign trade zone for the express purpose of bringing goods in and essentially trying to reduce their cost. Some of the industries that qualify for foreign trade zones, now all these on the screen are not all of the different industries that qualify, but some of the major companies that participate in foreign trade zones are automotive parts, aerospace, which I know is very akin to Mexicali, chemicals, which we have a lot of in Yuma, Arizona, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, textiles, and so forth. These different industries I know are a base of a lot of interest for our entire region. And so, you know, whether you're doing manufacturing or warehousing in any of these industry spaces or maybe some other area, I think it'd be really beneficial for you to look a little deeper into how a foreign trade zone may work for you. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. So we have a company locally called Barco Stamping, and Barco essentially takes cold rolled steel and aluminum and they manufacture it into finished goods that are recessed lighting for housing and for commercial developments. Now, Barco is really suffering from costs related to new tariffs that were imposed upon them when the Trump administration increased them on steel and aluminum. And so for them, a great opportunity for them to take advantage of foreign trade zone was essentially that they'd be able to start bringing in that steel and aluminum into their facilities at no cost and no additional tariffs. And once they were able to manufacture that cold rolled steel into a final finished product, they would actually pay a far lesser tariff on the finished good than the raw material. And so that's just one example of how companies can really benefit from foreign trade zones, but there's so many different ways in which, you know, industries of all types really could be a benefit to it. So a quick background on the Yuma County Foreign Trade Zone number 219. Ours is called an alternative site framework. There are two different kinds of foreign trade zones. There are foreign trade zones that are essentially general purpose, in which you have to designate an area of your community where you can establish foreign trade zones, and then it can only go in that one area. Yuma County is a lot different. We actually went about incorporating what's called an alternative site framework area. So essentially now for the entire Yuma County area, you can establish a foreign trade zone anywhere within our county borders, and that foreign trade zone can be used for all the different purposes we talked about. This is very advantageous because you're not limited to a certain area of a community. Most communities around the United States do not have this program. So Yuma in particular is very, very unique in that respect. And it also makes it a lot more flexible for you to decide where your foreign trade zone would be located, whether it be at the border, whether it be a little bit further north in our city, or even out in some of our more rural East County areas, depending upon what your uses would be needed, or even on the border of California as well. So you have a lot of flexibility with our foreign trade zone in particular, and that really can open up so many different opportunities for you going forward. So jumping into what types of foreign trade zones exist. Well, you have a magnet site, which essentially is a site in which you can establish a foreign trade zone that can serve multiple users. You're not confined to just one particular type of usage within a magnet site. Essentially, you are creating, for large part, industrial parks and large tracts of land are really good for magnet sites because you can decide that this is an area where you want to establish a foreign trade zone, and you have different users that can take advantage of your foreign trade zone within this magnet site. A lot of speculative developers, a lot of industrial park developers set up magnet sites within foreign trade zones because they know they have clients or customers that have a use for foreign trade zone, but at the same time, there's a multitude of them. And so this is one way of going about it. Now in Yuma, for the most part, we have usage-driven sites. And a usage-driven site is a site that's established for one operating company. That company applies on behalf of their entity or their incorporated business, and they alone manage their foreign trade zone. They're the only ones that can be within that zone. All the goods and services that come through that zone are directly related to their operation, and no one else can access that zone besides that one company. And so as you evaluate if foreign trade zones would work for you or your clients, that would be the first decision to make would be, are we going to be a magnet site or are we going to be a usage driven site? And either way, my company and myself in particular can help you with explaining more about how that works and essentially which one would be the best fit for you. This is just a snapshot of some of the companies that are within our foreign trade zone. Our foreign trade zone would be considered fairly small compared to some of the other foreign trade zones around the country, like LA and Houston and so forth. But we have some really quality companies that actually have operations in both Mexico and the United States. So for instance, one would be Gowan Milling. They have sites all around the world in which they source chemicals that they bring into the foreign trade zone here in Yuma. Those chemicals are then reformulated into different products, many of them being herbicides, pesticides, insecticides that you see in Home Depot, Lowe's, and other storefronts. And Gowan Milling saves over $10 million a year in duties and tariffs by utilizing the foreign trade zone within Yuma County. I already spoke about Barco Stamping. A new company we have is called Shoreside Logistics. This is a company that actually has a lot of cogeneration equipment that they use in Mexico for mining and for other excavation purposes. And then when the season's over, they bring it into Yuma, into our foreign trade zone to store those items until they use them the next year. And they as well are going to save upwards of about $1 million a year just in cost of moving goods across the border because of the foreign trade zone. So as you can see, the foreign trade zone runs across a wide variety of different uses. So for us, really, whatever you think your customers could utilize within a foreign trade zone, we are here to help with that. So here's the reason why foreign trade zones are used. And I'll get into, so this is probably the most important part of the whole discussion today is, why would you want to be in a foreign trade zone? How would it benefit you? And how does it work to your advantage? So the first way a foreign trade zone works to your advantage would be duty deferral. For instance, if you're bringing in a good from, let's say, China, and you have to pay 25% on that good when you bring it into the United States before you do anything to it, a foreign trade zone allows you to not pay on that duty until you decide if you want to remanufacture that good, or if you want to hold it and then sell it into the United States, or maybe for some reason you want to take that good and then bring it in and then at some point in time resell it back into the foreign market. So duty deferral allows you to not pay on that duty of that good when you receive it until you decide to release it from your foreign trade zone. That's one major benefit. Second one would be duty reduction. So same scenario, you bring a good in from China, it has a 25% duty on it. You decide to take that item, like a piece of steel, and you want to manufacture it into a different part. Well, typically the final part is going to have a lower duty than the initial raw good that you brought in. So that's how a foreign trade zone will work to your advantage as well, is that when you take that piece of steel and you manufacture it into a light housing, then at that point in time, that duty usually goes down between 80 and 90% from its original duty rate. So with Barco, they were able to take rolled steel that was at 25% duty, and their final good is going to be roughly around 3% duty. So you can see how that immediately saves the company a lot of money by doing so. And then duty elimination as well. So if you want to bring in that good and you want to take it and manufacture it into a different part, and then you have customers around the world that want to buy that part from you, well, if you bring that good into a foreign trade zone and do that remanufacturing, and then once you sell that good to your customers around the world, you never pay any duties on that good because essentially it never entered into the United States and you're sending it back into a foreign market. So that's really the ultimate goal, is to eliminate all your duties if possible, but at least at minimum you can reduce them or defer them. Another advantage would be a process called merchandise processing fee, which is a little bit more complicated, but essentially every time you bring a good into the United States, you pay a fee up to $500 on that truckload. And so if you have a lot of truckloads entering across the border into the United States, you're going to have a lot of fees. And one example of that would be a company we have locally pays upwards of over $800,000 a week in MPF fees to bring battery shells into the United States. Well, with the merchandise processing fee consolidation, you actually can take all your weekly MPF fees and consolidate them into one $500 a week fee. Now, again, I know this is a bit technical, but this is something we could walk you through, but it certainly can be incredibly beneficial for users crossing goods across the Mexican border into the United States on a daily or weekly basis. And this could be a huge cost savings for users that are moving goods from Mexico into the United States and so forth. Another one would be streamlined logistics. Because the item that's entering in a foreign trade zone is treated as if it's never entered into the United States, when your good comes in through one of the ports of entry, whether it be Ensenada or whether it be LA Long Beach, that good is not inspected by CBP. It is treated as if a privileged item and it goes directly to your facility without ever being touched, which obviously creates a better streamlined logistics supply chain. It helps you with just-in-time delivery. There are a lot of benefits from a logistical standpoint with having this program. And lastly, Yuma County has a very unique provision within our foreign trade zone that only one other state in America has, that any user within a foreign trade zone can reduce their property taxes on their facility by about 80%. Now, this shouldn't be the reason why you enter in a foreign trade zone, but this is obviously a very advantageous part of the program that you could utilize as well. A couple of additional ways that you can see foreign trade zones can benefit your company are, the elimination of having to change labeling, which I know for a lot of companies is very important and very critical to their operations, transfer of title and quota. I'm not going to get too deep into that today, but as you can see that, the number of benefits for a foreign trade zone can be very, very large. This example right here helps you kind of better understand how foreign trade zones work as it relates to different ways of reducing your costs. So you can kind of see in a very illustrative way how if you bring a spark plug in to a foreign trade zone and you don't pay on it, and then you keep it in your foreign trade zone for as long as you like, there is no time frame how long you can keep your good within a foreign trade zone. And then once you decide that you found customers that want to buy that spark plug, and then you decide to sell them into the United States, only at that point in time, when that spark plug is released from the foreign trade zone, do you pay that duty. So you can essentially keep your cash flow open for 4 or 5 months while you're trying to find customers of that spark plug, and then at that point in time, you sell it. The duty exemption part, same kind of example. When you bring that spark plug in, it's stored in the FTZ, and then it's re-exported. As we talked about before, you don't pay on that duty of that spark plug because it never actually entered into the United States because it was in foreign trade zone number 219. And then the last one, as we talked about, when you take a certain raw good and you store it and incorporate it into a finished good, like a muffler going into a car, at that point in time, that muffler is then assessed at half the duty of its original rate. So once again, just some of the illustrative ways in which a foreign trade zone can be very beneficial to your companies. Now, I want to jump ahead into something I hear a lot from people, which is what's the difference between a foreign trade zone and a bonded warehouse? And it's a really good question. And it took me a long time to try to figure out actually the differential between the two. But as you can see here, these are some of the main differences between a foreign trade zone and a bonded warehouse. Now, just a quick plug, we do have bonded warehouses in Yuma County, R.L. Jones and Spindle Cooling, and some of our other users do have those right now. So we can offer you both options within our entire region. But for today's discussion, the reason why a foreign trade zone may make more sense to you is you can see it. First and foremost, you are not under the control of customs. You have full independent control over your goods, which for a lot of companies is very advantageous. Along with that, the goods are only subject to customs once you release those goods, versus in a bonded warehouse, they can be audited at any point in time by customs, which for some folks can be very problematic or a headache. Along with that, you don't have the storage of your dutiable and local goods can be used, in which, as opposed to a bonded warehouse, it's only for goods only. Another big item for many people is the time of storage. Keeping your goods in a foreign trade zone with no time frame for release is very, very, very important for some groups. It really allows you to go out there and identify new markets that may work or identify new customers that would want to buy your goods. So that's incredibly beneficial because sometimes, obviously, you can't find a customer the first day you receive those goods. And so foreign trade zones give you the time and the lead way to essentially build your market and build your customer base. For companies that plan on taking those goods and actually turning them into something else, you cannot do that within a bonded warehouse, but you can do that within a foreign trade zone. So if you want to take a raw part and then turning it into something else, foreign trade zones will work for you as opposed to bonded warehousing, which is just for warehousing. And then the final part with a foreign trade zone, and because of Yuma's very unique position, we are able to locate it anywhere within our county because we have ports of entry in different areas, as opposed to a bonded warehouse, which has to be fairly close to a customs location. So those are just a little breakdown of the differential between the different uses. And I know a lot of people get those confused. And then along with that, what I hear a lot of times from people is they call foreign trade zones free trade zones. Now, they can be synonymous sometimes, but the reality is that a foreign trade zone is specifically for companies looking to bring in goods into one location and do what we've already talked about, versus a free trade zone is essentially a geographical area that allows for freedom of movement of goods between one incorporated area and another. So not a big difference, sometimes can be the same, but for a lot of folks, the differential is the fact that a foreign trade zone, a lot more activity can occur, and that's probably the biggest difference. So lastly, just to kind of walk you through the process, a lot of people see foreign trade zones and they get very excited about them because they see all the cost savings, they see all the ways that they can move their goods quicker, they see all the ways that they can essentially make their customers happy by reducing costs. But you have to understand that even though the foreign trade zone has a lot of benefits, it also comes with a lot of responsibilities as well. And so from the outset, this is the process to apply for a foreign trade zone. My organization would help you through every step of this entire process. We would hold your hand. We'd make sure that you're doing everything correctly. That's part of our job as administrator of the foreign trade zone number 219. And once we hopefully got to the finish line, which is number 6, at that point in time, then the real work begins. This is actually the easy part about it. You will have to assign an individual at minimum to operate your foreign trade zone. It does require pretty much one singular personnel to make sure your foreign trade zone is compliant with the CBP, to make sure that it's actually doing all the filing correctly, and to ensure that on a day in, day out basis that you're following all the rules and laws of a foreign trade zone. Because you've been given the responsibility to operate on your own without any oversight from Customs and Border Patrol. And so with that, you have to obviously follow a lot of different rules that go with that. Along with that, there will be an annual report that has to be filed. And so with all these different steps of foreign trade zone, I want everyone to understand that even though it has a lot of benefits and a lot of different advantages, it also will require quite a bit of time that I will be there at every step with you to ensure that it's being done correctly, and that at the end of the day, your company is taking advantage of the program and obviously benefiting in the ways it was intended to do so. So with that, I am going to finish talking, and I would love to hear from the group and find out if there's any questions I can answer about foreign trade zones, and hopefully provide some additional value and input for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Greg. That was great. I'm getting a few of the questions that are coming in. So give me just a second to get set up and I'll start shooting those over to you. So let's see. So in summary, Greg, what characteristics should the area have to qualify for a foreign trade zone?
Well, first and foremost, you need to make sure that you are receiving a good from a foreign market. So it can even be Mexico, which even though I know we have trade agreements with Mexico, it can still work within a foreign trade zone. And then secondarily, you need to make sure that the goods that you're receiving, you intend to either re-export those, or you understand what kind of cost savings are going to go into establishing a foreign trade zone. The actual physical attributes of an area really don't matter. It can be a land site, it can be a building. Obviously, it could be anywhere in which you're going to be bringing goods to store them. But the important part is ensuring that will I be saving money once I pay a person to manage my foreign trade zone, along with understanding that what it's going to entail for me to keep a foreign trade zone compliant. Or if you can answer yes to all those and then look at the ultimate cost savings, then that's the most important part about foreign trade zone. We get a lot of companies that want to become foreign trade zone users. They have the building, they have the land, but then when we really pour into the numbers and really look at what's going to be the cost advantages, most companies really don't justify the foreign trade zone activation. But for the companies that do, they can save, as I mentioned before, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on an annual basis, which is obviously what the foreign trade zone is intended to do.
Correct. And then I guess I have to stress with what you've stressed as far as compliance, because once you get an active zone, then that's when you jump into CBP, and then there's significant CBP involvement, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And CBP, we have a great working relationship with our CBP officials down here. They do a great job of administering the foreign trade zone from their side. They're very responsive. They're very open and supportive of the foreign trade zone. So I would tell everyone we're very unique because most areas in the country don't have the level of support from their CBP officers like we do within our foreign trade zone. And from the outset, they're going to be more involved in your day-to-day activity until they feel comfortable that you know what you're doing, that you're remaining compliant. And once you get to a stage in which they feel as if you're trustworthy, that you have the entire process, essentially perfected, then you'll see them less and less to a point where they will never be on site when you receive goods or when you export goods. They essentially will check it off from their computer once they see it. So that's further down the line, but you can be assured that once you get there, that you will have very little involvement from CBP in your activities, which is the ultimate goal of the foreign trade zone, to be a trusted user of an international commerce vehicle.
Correct. And then just respecting that, lawful trade that CBP definitely promotes. We have a question from Mr. Russ Jones himself. He asked, can a subzone be established within a section of a building?
Yes, that's a great question, Russ. So essentially, most companies will establish a subzone within a building. Most individual companies don't have a need for a foreign trade zone to cover an entire facility base. And so when we have companies that are activating, we typically identify an area within the building that has to either be outlined at minimum with some kind of delineation of separation. CBP prefers to have chain link fence so that they can come in and know that only approved users are within that area. And there's also no mixing of goods between foreign trade zone items and domestic items. But within that building is where you'll actually house your foreign trade zone goods. And those do need to be secure so that there's no confusion, there's no intermingling of different products. And ultimately CBP feels comfortable that you are ensuring that the items that they've entrusted you with are protected.
Okay, wonderful. And that goes with subzoning just a section of a building.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Linda Elliott Nelson from Arizona Western College asked, Greg, when attracting industry to the Yuma County area, how important are foreign trade zones to companies looking to relocate?
Oh, first, hi, Linda. Good to hear from you. They become far more important for our area now than they have in the past. And I'll tell you why. So China, California, and COVID essentially have made Yuma County a far more attractive destination for international commerce to move through because our officials like Mr. Jones and other visionaries created a phenomenal commercial port of entry down in San Luis. And because of that, new ports of entry have become ideal for moving goods into the United States. We all know LA Long Beach has continued to become more cumbersome to move goods. You have users, you hear nightmare stories about not getting goods into the United States for upwards of 6 weeks. And so now companies are starting to look at the Port of Ensenada and in other areas as another new route to enter into the United States And so Yuma, well, San Luis in particular, has become an identified port of entry to move those goods. And with that, a lot of those goods need to be stored in foreign trade zones until they're either sold or those parts are manipulated or manufactured into final goods. And so we are seeing a lot more activity from users across the world that want to enter into our commercial port of entry via the Port of Ensenada, and the foreign trade zone becomes a huge tool to do so and a vehicle to encourage new investment because of that.
Right, definitely. And then again, stressing either the duty elimination, or the duty deferral. Because while your goods are sitting here, there's no need to pay on something you have no access to for up to 6-8 weeks, correct?
Exactly. You know, and along with the fact, just receiving those goods in a far faster timeline than you would if it was not in a foreign trade zone is incredibly advantageous. Because if you have a customer that's demanding a turnaround of, let's say, 2 months, and you have to wait 3 weeks just to get it out of the port of entry, well, you can see how that could become very problematic for a user very quickly. And then along with that, just as a whole, the foreign trade zone becomes very, very interesting because our port of entry, you know, has some of the shortest wait times in all of America, if not the shortest. And so the ability to be able to move through our port of entry, which is state of the art, and get those goods to your facility to get assembled and then shipped out to your customers becomes a very advantageous proposition that you can hold over your competitors.
Definitely. And, just the time to market or just the time to get into the consumer's hands, that's always having to do with bottom dollar. And we just always want to ensure the most efficient way for our users here within the region to make sure that that's successful for them.
Exactly, Bina. And if I can just add too, you know, the fact our proximity to California, right? The
Mhm.
7th or 9th biggest economy in the world continues to be a very strong asset that we have. And so, you know, if you can move goods around LA Long Beach and bring them in through other ports of entry, or if you even want to bring them in through LA Long Beach and then get them to Yuma, which is within a 1-day truck haul of California, and then do something with them and then send them back to California, that is, again, another major advantage you're going to have over your other competitors, whether it be in the Midwest or East Coast.
Wonderful. Well, Greg, I don't have any more Q&As lined up, but again, I want to thank you for just highlighting the uniqueness of our area, the differences between the foreign trade zone and the bonded warehousing, and the proximity of where Yuma County lies to CBP and the ports of entry, to where this could be a process that all it just takes is a phone call or an email to you so these users can get started. This presentation has been made available by Greg. If you would like a copy of it, go ahead and email me direct. It's bgeorge@gypa.org. Be more than happy to send you over this information and just continue to share, again, our regional assets. So with that, I want to thank all of our presenters for the second series, focusing on logistics: Gladys Brown from Yuma International Airport, Licenciado Víctor Manuel Garcia Bertin from Aeropuerto Internacional Mexicali, and Mr. Russ Jones, manager of RL Jones Customs Brokers, and obviously you, Greg, from Greater Yuma Economic Development Corporation. So we're thrilled and honored that you guys have participated in here with us. And again, we're putting this information out there for present users, for future users, and anybody that feels like they want to go ahead and take action on any one of the logistical methods or anything that we could possibly help your industry or help your business with. Our emails are on the screen for you. We have our contact information. By all means, reach out. All it takes is just a conversation to know what's going to be a good fit. And at the end of the day, just like Greg had stated, we can work efficiently. We have a wonderful port of entry here in San Luis, Arizona, between San Luis, Arizona and San Luis, Sonora, that's here to serve your needs. So with that, I want to thank the group. I want to thank everybody who has attended. And thank you again, Greg, for such a wonderful presentation. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Buna. Always a good time. Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.